Hey guys, so I'm coming today to talk to you about one of the questions that I get the most of is people contacting me and asking me for names of manufacturers, to refer them to manufacturers because they want to make a product for X price. And now I have stopped referring people to manufacturers because these days it's not so easy to refer them to manufacturers because so many people don't have a defined idea of what they want to do, and if they can't explain it to me, I can't really refer them to a manufacturer. But even if they explain it to me, very often the mistake that just about 80% of people do is that they haven't costed it properly. So they have an idea of what they want to make, and it could be sketchy, could be detailed. They have an idea of how much they want to sell it to, and it could be just an idea, or they could have researched it and it's based on something substantial. But the critical step they haven't done is work backwards, find out what the cost should be, and from there reflect that cost with the design, because the cost of your product depends on the design, and more importantly than that, it depends on the actual elements of the design and the finishing and the details. So you know how people say devil is in the details? In fashion, that's really important, especially when you're making a product. So today I wanted to quickly jump in here and talk to you about the details. So how you finish, I would use garments, but also that goes for accessories, for jewelry, etc. But how you finish something is really important because it affects the price. So the best way to approach this is to look at your competitors and perhaps study their product or product similar to what you want to launch and look at the design and the finishing touches. So if you have a garment, for instance, it's really important that you study how are the sleeves connected, how are the seams, finished. So for instance, on my top here, I have an overlocking, but there's other different ways of finishing off the seams. And depending on what you as a designer choose, whether it's going to be an overlock or you're going to leave it rough, or whether you're going to use a French seam or something else, and this type of finishes also depend on your material, you would get a different price. So if you don't really specify this to the factory you work with, they're going to take a wild guess, and either they're going to use something to cut corners and make it easier for themselves, or they, depending on the type of factory they are, perhaps the way you have conveyed who you are, what you're trying to build, etc., they would make a decision for you. So let's say that you want to launch a brand of t-shirts, for instance, and you know that these t-shirts have to compete with, let's say, Topshop t-shirts, and they're not going to be very expensive, for instance. But to you, you don't want them to be expensive, but to you, your brand is going to be this, high-level brand. It's going to be aimed for, let's say, influencers. So that's how you describe it to the factory. So the factory is not going to think, oh, this person wants to sell t-shirts for £15 on the market. They're going to think, oh, this person wants to launch a brand of premium t-shirts that are going to be higher than everyone else. So when you don't specify how you want things to be made, they will perhaps, use a seam that will be beautiful finishing, maybe something that's used in the couture, let's say, but it will cost so much more. And then you get your sample, and they give you a price that is way more expensive than what you even want to sell it on the market. So can you see how there's a disconnect between how you have portrayed your brand, however you have in mind, how by giving vague details and not defined, you have asked them to do something and left the door open for them to make decisions on your behalf because you haven't specified it. And that also is really important. If you don't give them a target price to work to, you're just giving them carte blanche. So obviously they're going to want to make more money out of you. So hence, it's really important that you are very specific. So the way to do this is, I firmly believe, and whenever I've developed something that I don't know much about, which has happened very often because I've done all kinds of product developments in the past, but I would just go and see who does what, and I would go and see what's there on the market. And sometimes I would buy something cheap, and I would then study it, get the dimensions, use it as a kind of starting initial base. I would see how it's finished, and then I would study what are the type of finishes. So for instance, in garments, you have so many different types of seams, and you can find everything online. I recommend that first of all you study other garments and you see it and then kind of see what you really like and think, do I want my garment to be finished like this? If you don't know the terminology of what this seam is called, then Google it. There's lots of images, or ask other people, or if you're seeing factories, if you're going and talking to them, just in passing conversation, just ask them, what is this? Make a note, study it, Google it, learn more about it. However, this day and age, because we live in such an amazing time when everything is online and you can find anything, you can also, access people's knowledge globally around the world. And one way of people to promote their businesses is also by now writing books, because before in the past you had to get a publisher to publish a book. You don't need to do that anymore, right? You can self-publish. So I just want to show you one amazing resource. And this is this book called 101 Sewing Seams. And it's a book by an Australian lady who has a business that is only dealing with seams. It's quite amazing. But she's compiled all the different kinds of seams, here, explaining where to use them. Actually, let's see, where to use them, how to use them, the complexity of them. Like, for instance, see how this, where this is the machine, the machine, how you put the fabric, how you stitch it, etc. And it has codes, you can put notes, etc. here. So this book it's quite amazing. It's also on Amazon. I'll post a link to it. It's an amazing little book, and it can teach you about all the various seams there are in manufacturing. And you can make notes, the terminology. You can then use that to discuss it with the manufacturer. You can get to learn what's expensive, what's not expensive. Because, for instance, overlocking, easy, right? It doesn't cost much. But then if you want something more detailed, if you're using, let's say, beautiful silk, well, overlocking would look cheap on silk. So you want to perhaps do a French seam or something else, but they are more costly. So they would really impact on your the price of your end material. And if your end material, your end product cannot bear that price, there's no point. You need to find something that adds to the product. It allows you the product to look really well and the way you want it, but it doesn't add to the price so much. So details are really important. Knowing how you want things to be finished, understanding this, and not delegating to someone else to make these decisions for you. It's really, really important. And yes, so how do you learn these things? Like I said, first of all, look at other competitors, look at similar products that you like. Take pictures. If it's something really cheap and you like it, I mean, we all wear clothes, so go through your clothes and see what you like, what you don't like. Be aware of if something has a little bit of stretch or not, because that requires, and limits you in the type of finishes that you want. So finishing really depends also on the materials. If you have chiffon materials, really delicate evening materials, again, overlocking will look really cheap on them. You need something else. You have pin hems, French seams, again. So study all of this. Study on the garments like for like, what you want to do. Go on YouTube, read blogs. So in the course, in the Fashion Manufacturing Mastery course, I put resources like this, blog posts where you can go and access information like this, links to books, links to a glossary of details, etc. So I give a lot of resources to shortcut the time you would spend looking on things, just to help you understand everything that you need to know in order to get what you want at the price that you want it and find the right manufacturer for you, etc. And these are the really important components. So YouTube, there's a lot of videos. There's tons of stuff. I mean, YouTube is part of Google. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. And so they have everything. And they would also explain how it's made. So if someone said to you, for instance, oh, if we were to do a French seam, it would add $10 to the price. And you think, what, $10? How can it, possibly, add so much money? If you go on YouTube and find a tutorial on how it's made, you would see someone explaining about the seam, how it's made, etc. And you would probably get a very good idea whether they have really been correct in telling you that it takes more time, it takes more effort, therefore it costs more, or whether they're really kind of BSing you, right? And you go and then challenge their view. So You also can speak to pattern cutters. So if you are working with a pattern cutter to make your own pattern, they're a great source to, pick their brain, to ask them, if I wanted, this is my target cost, or I wanted it to be at a better cost, etc., which seam should I use? They would be able to advise you. Sewing groups, I don't know if anyone is part of sewing groups, but going to sewing groups and talking to hobbies, to ladies, there's so many ladies who just for hobby make things for themselves. They don't want to make a business, and they're part of sewing groups. And you can also there experiment. You can see how something is done. You can test with their help, perhaps, some ideas, etc. So that by the time you go to a factory, you have an idea what you're talking about. You know what you're asking them to do. And when you say to, let's say, a factory, I don't want you, because it's really important that you say to factories what you don't want as well as what you want. So you can go and say, I definitely don't want you to go down that path of finishing touches, because it would add extra cost to my product, which it's not going to be appreciated perhaps of the customer, or not justify the price, etc. So you're guiding the factory, and then they see that you know what you're talking about, and they're not going to try to, pull wool over your eyes. So devil is in the details. It's really important that you know what you're talking about when you go to factories. And in the course, there's a whole lesson on it. There's a whole host of resources, etc., that I give just to help you, set you in the right direction, and help you get what you want. And again, I will post to this book, 101 Sewing Seams. It's pretty brilliant, even if I say so myself. I was amazed that someone can come up with a book on seams, but it's happened. It's great. Oh, and at the end also, I didn't show you, but it has like it has products, shirts, polo, t-shirts, etc. And it shows you the type of seams you should be asking your manufacturers to have, the type of seams they used where. And you can literally even use images like this in your spec sheets and your tech packs, etc. So pretty handy book. So the word to use is knowledge. So use that word. Send me a DM or post below the word. So hope this helps.